in a stunning finale, coming to you live from the Echo Esports back room. We got Dragon Centennials concluding the Race to World First recap, and the last 24 hours have been very, very exciting, yes?
Yeah, we expected the race had a chance of being over by the time we recorded this video, but I didn't think it was likely. But it has ended. Liquid has killed the boss now a few hours ago at the start of their 7th day, which is pretty impressive. Big credit to them. Congratulations, a well-deserved world first. Echo are still pulling, trying to get this boss, but they are now well over their bedtime. They had been disciplined about going to bed by like 10 p.m. But here on their 6th day, they are staying up until it dies or they die is the call, I believe, that's been made.
So how are the vibes?
It's not too bad around here. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously sucks to lose, right?
Yeah.
That's but you know, they're off of a 3-tier winning streak. They I don't know. I mean, it sucks to lose, right? That's at least it's not a loss that is gonna feel like a unfair, Blizzard, doing some weird stuff loss. That's a nice thing, right? You don't have a Razageth, a Razageth boss that's being nerfed by 50% in the phases, which, again, I don't think that takes away from their win last time, because I don't think that it necessarily affected the outcome, but it did affect how it feels about that kill, right? Whereas this time around, it seems like it's been just mostly, if undertuned a little bit, but clean encounters through the way through. And so I don't know.
If you want. Okay, so I think let's talk about the last 24 hours and kind of what we've seen. So whenever we left off yesterday, Echo was ahead on Sarkareth at 49%, Method was at 59, and Liquid was just at 40-ish%. After that, going into...
Good.
Oh, sorry, what were we going to say?
No, it's because they turned off their streams, right? That's what you were going to talk about.
Exactly.
In a break for Liquid into stream turnoff, which was a controversial decision on Twitter, of course, and around the place, but it's not the first time it's happened. It's something that both teams have done, both Liquid and Echo, and I guess back in the day, even Method I guess Method never did it back once they started streaming, but since they became Echo has done it a little bit in Castle Natria.
Method did it in BOD.
Did they? Okay, yeah. Then fair enough. It's a case of like, you're streaming. Obviously, you're streaming the Race to World First because it's exciting. It's most exciting when you're ahead, but it's also the most revealing when you're ahead. And depending on where you are in the day-night cycle, right before you go to sleep is the time where you're revealing information that you're not going to have the first chance to exploit. They are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So turning off the streams is big value competitively there. Of course, there is a downside. That downside lands on the sponsors. It lands on the fans. It does suck to be a fan of the Race to World First and not be able to watch the two guilds progressing and not watch all the pulls of one guild. That sucks. And that's the sort of thing where if a guild does it too much, maybe that's going to hurt their income. Maybe that's going to cause problems for them. But I don't think you can blame Liquid for doing this, especially off of a 3-tier losing streak, like really not wanting to give away what would have been definitely a big advantage of showing the start of their P3 strat. And the whole of their P3 strat probably was what they were even testing at that time.
So yeah, exactly. They went dark. And then they were practicing phase 3. And then once they came back up in the morning, and so they went to bed at like 12:30 local time for them. Their time to be awake was 5 a.m. local time, and they were in the raid pulling by 6. And that is crazy that they were waking. They were worried that Echo, and they stated this a couple times, they were worried that Echo was going to kill the boss very quickly.
They were paranoid about it because they knew that the boss was so fragile, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a flimsy encounter that could die from 40 to 0 in a handful of hours. And of course, they didn't know that Echo were going to struggle with it. They didn't know that Echo didn't have as good of a P3 plan ready. They didn't have all that it looking quite as good, and they were going to have to reprog P1 without the 5th healer for a while, and that was going to take a while. But of course, they couldn't have known that. So yeah, they decided, all right, we're staying up late and we're waking up early because we know this boss is dead soon, and we want to make sure it's us because we are ahead, right?
Yeah.
We can do this.
And I mean, they've stated this a couple times too. They believe that showing their P3 strategy would have allowed Echo to almost immediately win off the back of like a couple of strategy decisions for things that they were doing in phase 3. There was this one strategy, namely where a bunch of people are downstairs. Scott, which is their tank, and Dryny, which is a holy paladin on their team, comes up a little bit early to force the dispel knockback bombs onto those two players. Dryny pre-bubbles it, and Scott dwarfs it off to avoid all the knockbacks, and then all of the players come up and they start burning a boss. And like that is like a pivotal moment, and that's like a strategy decision that if you show to people, they're going to take that. And like a guild as skilled as Echo, all they need is just a little bit, and they'll take a mile from it.
Yeah, although it turns out this time around they haven't been able to actually do that now that the kill is entirely public. They've still been working for several hours and have yet to get the conversion. Of course, things may have been different if it was world first on the line instead of world second, but I don't know. This tier, Liquid have just looked, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, but they've looked better, right? They've just looked stronger on a lot of these fights. The pull counts of fights like Zaskarn, Magmarax, Echo of Neltharion, right? These are historically places where Echo kill it second, but they kill it in fewer pulls, in less progression time, and they get to kind of make up an advantage throughout the raid.
Mm-hmm.
And this time around, that just didn't happen. That was not possible. And Liquid were first and faster and better, and that combination is going to be impossible to beat.
I mean, it was kind of weird yesterday because I remember you and I were talking about it, and I was like, is it controversial to say that I feel like Liquid is like ahead? And it's because like just do the eye test, it seemed like Liquid was always front running, but then once they would go to bed, we talked about slingshot season. Echo would just like slingshot themselves in the lead, and you're like, wait, is Liquid actually losing this? Like, can Liquid lose this even though they've? I don't know. It's just like, but watching them, you're like, oh my gosh, this team is playing insane. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird because it seems like it should have been a lot. It seemed like they should have had more of a lead than they did based off of off of that feel. But Liquid were still. Echo were still going to bed ahead for the past few nights, which was not like that's not something that was true back in like Nyalotha, which was the last tier that Liquid like Giga won, right? They won Sired and Aetherius tier, but that one was maybe a little bit more based off of being a little bit ahead and then converting on the reset really well, which was of course also a valid win, but a little bit of a different texture than say the Nyalotha win.
I mean, even just like looking at Liquid's page on Warcraft logs, they looked absolutely phenomenal. I think their gearing decisions were also super top tier. And this is, I mean, we thought that Echo was going to come into this, and I think that a lot of people were speculating that Echo was going to win their third Race to World First in a row.
Fourth. This would be the fourth.
Oh my god, the fourth. Oh my god, the fourth. And that like
Sylvanas, Jailer, and Raz.
Yeah, it seemed like from a lot of community perspective, like a dynasty was being built. Like Echo was going to win again. Liquid just put a stop to that, and I mean, it was in good fashion. I think that this was definitely a great tier for them, an excellent tier for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably good for the Race to World First that Liquid has won here because, Liquid, first of all, back in Nyalotha, they had a lot to prove, right? North America hadn't won in 10 years or something. They did that. But then in Castle Nathria, things were a lot closer. And in Sylvanas and beyond, Echo started to prove that again, after the method collapse and the Echo rebuild, they were able to prove that they could get it, and by Jailer they were looking almost dominant. So again, Liquid had a lot to prove this tier. There was a lot of burden on them, and they exceeded those expectations. I think that there were some people I was talking to. They were like, "Oh yeah, Echo's just going to win again for sure." But you can go back to our Day Zero video where you and I were making predictions, and I think that I stand by what I said, which is that if you were giving either of these two teams less than 40% chance of getting world first, you were being exploitable. You could be bet against and have some money made against you.
Yeah, and hey, Liquid looked great. So we've also seen a bunch of community discussion in regards to just what was the raid like as a whole. I think a lot of people have been talking about just the general tuning of the raid, and I think that we're going to talk about the tuning, but I think we also have to talk about the gearing. I think that this is the closest that players are going to be to a Race to World First kill gear-wise that has been in a while, and the Liquid guys were talking about that a little bit post-race, how the new gearing system and the upgrade system allowed you to accelerate your gear a lot very quickly with the things like the Shadowflame crests, with the things like the just with the crests in general, because they had people. What did they end up killing Sarkareth
like 436? 436, right? Something like that?
Something along those lines.
You can look that, down.
Is it actually? Okay. Oh yeah, 436-2. Yeah,
436-2, which is a little bit misleading because they have like Aeronog rings and Onyx amulets that are pulling that eye level down, socketed bracers, socketed belts. So a lot of guilds will be higher eye level, but actually lower power if you don't have those items, right? If you're sitting on a 430 unsocketed ring, you are losing a huge amount of damage compared to an Aeronog ring, especially with a socket. So very stupid thing about this gearing, by the way, this particular time around is the Aeronog rings and the Onyx amulets and stuff mattering as much as they do. The 5-month farm mattering as much as it did, getting all of those very rare items. Seems like it'll be a little bit less of a problem for next year because the very rares are a little bit less good. But either way, like you were saying, the point is Liquid and Echo are pretty close to Mythic gear. It's not as close as they were during the Jailer tier, but it's close. That being said, we still have a lot of power, right? We're getting 447 craft items every 2 weeks. That they were 436. We're getting 447s for free every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we are getting 447s out of our vault if we're doing plus 20 keys, right? So that's 1.5 free 447s per week. Not mentioning all the Mythic lockout clear gear. Basically, all the gear they could want out of Heroic Raid, they had access to, but still, guilds that reach it later are going to have, like in the future resets, guilds are going to be, next reset, I think guilds are going to be pushing 440. The reset after that, 444, 445 even, are not off the table for the other top few guilds in the world.
So just talking about pull counts now, if you take the cumulative number of pulls across the whole entire raid tier, we're a little bit north of 200-ish. Whereas for some bosses, just barely north of 200-ish. Whereas for some individual bosses in the past couple of tiers, them like into bosses by themselves took 200 pulls. Stone Legion Generals
had like 5 bosses that were longer than this whole tier. Yeah,
Stone Legion Generals was like 275 by itself. Like there are a lot of raid tiers that have individual bosses that are more pulls than this whole entire raid tier. And I've seen some discourse talking about, was this raid too easy? Was the difficult? Should this been something that was on Blizzard's radar a little bit more? Maybe even potentially discrediting Liquid's Race to World First. Now, I think that in general, Liquid won the Race to World First. I don't think there's anything to really discredit. In regards to difficulty of this raid, I think it's definitely on the easier end. But if you go back and look at it, nothing was released really like overtuned that Blizzard had to crack down on. There were no like massive bugs that needed fixing. It was a bunch of small stuff. Obviously, there was some weird stuff with like immunities and whatnot, but it was normally just a bunch of small stuff. But
yeah,
what'd you think about the raid difficulty just generally?
First of all, I think it's ridiculous to discredit Liquid's win.
I also think that's ridiculous.
Raid. Yeah, that is an egregious take. I think though that the take that like, hey, I prefer if the race was a little bit harder and the tier was a little bit harder.
Sure,
are two takes that I hold those personally. Of course, the race should be a lower priority than the actual Mythic content, but I think that with the extra gear that we're getting every 2 weeks, this raid is going to end up getting melted by the top few hundred guilds over the next few weeks. And I have enjoyed more the tiers. I mean, Sepulchre was one of my favorite tiers, and but even like Castle Nathria, Stone Legion sucked, but Sludgefist was amazing, and Sire was really fun too. And these sort of like the hard bosses, the Painsmiths of the world, these are the ones that are memorable for me. I'm not sure there are going to be any memorable bosses out of Avarice for me. It's certainly not in the context of the Race to World First. Maybe for my guild, it's going to feel like Sarkareth will clear that bar, but I do think that it's not like a big miss, but I think they did miss on the easy side.
Magmarax ended up being kind of a
Magmarax's disappointment, right? Like that fight didn't do what it was supposed to do. Like it missed.
And the other point though, I think that Rashok actually provided a lot more content, a lot more bang for its buck relative to where it is placement was in the raid.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rashok is a great design of an encounter, but they put it, right at the start of the raid. So Echo killed it in 7 pulls. Liquid killed it in 20 or something,
19,
right?
Yeah.
Like 19. Guilds reaching it this week. Like my guild and your guild took 50 or whatever on it because we're sitting here with 2 and 3 splits respectively, and so it's a lot. It was I think a pretty fun day and a half of Prague for us, sure, but that's not. It's not the Sludgefist experience. And had they swapped Rashok and Magmarax positions in the raid, which is something that Liquid Max has said they would have been good, then the tier would have been a lot better. But they put a bad boss late and a good boss early, and that makes 2 bad bosses.
Yeah. Talias and Evitel had a pretty good tweet. And I think that this kind of resonates true with me. It says, if the raid is beaten in the first week, then it's trash. Also, if it's beaten in the 3rd week, it's trash. Also, if it's beaten the day after reset, then it's also trash. The only good raid lasts exactly 12.5 days. Come on, Blizzard, sort yourselves out. And I mean, it's kind of... I've seen people that are like, there is no winning here. There's like a Goldilocks situation where there's no perfect... I'm looking for a perfect raid length. And I'm just like...
Exactly. Like, I think that it wasn't perfect. But it was good. It was a fun
I
race.
fun.
It was a fun race
Yeah.
to watch. There was days where both guilds were progressing at the same time. There was Method coming in with a strong, what we expect to be third, but which could still be a second finish out of them as
That
well.
would be
After a
crazy.
really choke here at the end, which would be pretty wild. I think this is going to be our last video, so we won't get to talk about that if it does happen. But it's pretty unlikely, but it's still possible.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was. I would say good. It's very good they avoided having any big balance problems too.
the
Right, like
only
the raid being a little undertuned is it's fine. Obviously, it's better if it's not, but it's fine. The raid needing like a 50% nerf on several phases of an end boss is much less fine. So this
yeah.
was a lot better from that perspective.
Only other thing really notable about the race, I mean, obviously, I think we're done talking about like the bosses themselves.
Yeah,
Apparently, the legendary for evokers ended up dropping off of Mythic Sarkareth. It seems like the quest line is available just from Mythic Sarkareth itself. Sang was going like Sang, who was one of the evoker players for Liquid, was going through the quest line. Apparently, he needed to get some reagents from Raid, and he was already locked, and so he was having problems. So that there's a question of like, what all does he need? But I'm surprised that this is from Mythic.
yeah, it's interesting. There was the whole discussion about the mythic mount, which ended up getting added to the other difficulties as a low drop chance. But to me, it seems way more impactful for this legendary. But maybe that's just different types of players that care about different parts of the game, I guess, because that mount does look really good. But
Yeah,
this is a huge part of the game that is being locked behind a mythic end boss. I guess the consolation is that it's the easiest mythic end boss probably since going back a long ways. So maybe it'll be a little bit more accessible on that front. But still, a lot of evokers are not going to be able to get their hands on this unless they eventually downshift it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they downshift this to heroic later in the patch or something like that. That might be the plan here, to keep it exclusive and cool and prestigious and mysterious for a little while, and then make it actually accessible further down the road.
I will say, um, Evoker Legendary aside, this has definitely been one of the most interesting Race to World First to consume as a good viewer. I think that, I mean, even though it was short, I think that it had a lot of storyline and a lot of narratives that were able to be told over the course of the whole entire race, and that I think added a lot of value for me.
Yeah, so big congratulations to Liquid, and can't wait to see what happens in the next Race to World First. A lot of things that you could criticize about, the way that stuff has gone this tier. A lot of nitpicks that you'll hear, and you'll hear both of us talking about them. But of course, I agree. In general, it's a good race. The race is always fun, and there are a lot of disaster cases, and none of them came to pass this time. The better team won, and congratulations to Liquid. We will be back next Race to World First season, hopefully,
Yeah.
with another season of these recap videos. But that's going to be it for us this time.
All right. We will see you
Later.
guys later. See you guys next season. Adios.